Welcome to our webinar about hiring and onboarding sales teams. Yeah, maybe we can start with a short round of introductions. Obviously, we know each other, but I haven't met Celine. I know Karina, but yeah, short intro from my end. I'm Vladan, one of the founders at Noble. Yeah, we are a recruiting agency focusing on hiring, recruiting commercial talent, mostly for SaaS companies. Started about 7 years ago. Before that, I have a background in recruitment and in software sales myself a few years as well. And I'm 33 years old and live in Amsterdam. What about you, Jorien?
Yes, my name is Jorien. Nice to meet you and thanks for joining us. I'm a sales trainer and sales coach, predominantly in the software, SaaS, fintech and tech industry. And next to that, I am a consultant in helping organizations to professionalize or set up their onboarding programs for new hires in the sales team. Been doing that now for over 15 years. I'm 45 years old and I live south of Amsterdam in Amstelveen.
Hey, so today we're going to talk about hiring and onboarding. Yeah, two of our favorite topics that we're quite passionate about. So I'm going to start with the hiring part. And yeah, I can say that in the past 7 years, working with Noble Recruitment with all sorts of SaaS companies, from really small early stage startups to really big corporates, and mostly everything in between, that we've worked with a lot. Yeah, we've seen a lot of best practices, a lot of really good processes, really good hiring experiences, but unfortunately also a lot of the bad ones. So yeah, my goal today is to sort of go through some of the hiring process best practices and share some of the learnings that I've seen in the field working with some really cool companies that do this really well, and hopefully also learn a bit more about your experiences. And learn from each other. So my goal is to give you some takeaways and make the hiring process better. So on the agenda today, we'll talk a bit about defining and creating an ideal rep profile. That should sort of be the basis of your hiring strategy, and to not fall into the pitfalls of just hiring people that you like. And then defining a hiring process that enables you to prevent mishiring. Obviously, it's you will always make mishires in every hiring process, unfortunately, but having the right process in place will minimize the risk of making hiring mistakes. And then finally, for the hiring part, training and implementation on how to actually keep the machine going when you have everything in place. And then Jorien will take over and tell us about onboarding, importance and challenges, the fuck-ups and the success factors, and the practical next steps to conduct a successful onboarding program for commercial people. So starting with defining and creating your ideal rep profile. And it's important that this is also done per role. So creating an ideal rep profile per role for an account executive, for an SDR, a customer success manager. Usually the clients that we work with have these roles separate. I think that we're seeing a lot nowadays is that the AE and the SDR role are being combined into one sort of 360 sales role. In that case, obviously you create a ideal rep profile for that role if this is the case within your organization. I don't know how mature your sales organizations are at this moment. So defining goals and KPIs per role sounds pretty basic. But we've seen with a lot of startups that even this isn't done. So before you start hiring, it's important to think about what kind of person, what kind of salesperson are we going to hire? How does the ideal rep profile look like? And what goals and KPIs are we going to define per role? And also what is realistic, right? What we see with a lot of sales organizations is that you have a few people performing really, really well. And Jorien knows, I think, a lot more about this than I do. A few people performing really, really well. Then you have a large pool of sort of medium performers and also a small portion of the low performers. So how are you going to define your goals and KPIs per role? Obviously you're going to look at some of the higher performers or the average performers and base your goals and KPIs on that. right? You want to define the output goals per role, but maybe also the input goals. Then what you're going to do is create a sort of a scorecard where you look at what skills, knowledge, and behaviors are important to be successful in this role. So where in marketing you have ICP, you have the ideal sort of client profile, which is super specific on the characteristics. With the ideal rep profile, it's way more important that you look at what skills does somebody have, what knowledge is important for your organization and your sales role, and what kind of behaviors do you want in your sales reps. For example, for an SDR, an important behavior can be listening really well. So using the 2 ears and 1 mouth comparison. Or for example, asking good questions, asking follow-up questions. When looking at knowledge, for some companies, it's, for example, super important that you know about the industry or the market that you're selling into. And with the ideal rep profile, what you do is basically you rank all those skills, you define them first, and then you rank them also with a weighted score. So you create your sort of ideal person that has the right amount of market knowledge, the right amount of skills, the right amount of behavior that you want to stimulate. And that will help you to stay objective when speaking to candidates, but also when looking for candidates, when attracting candidates, and that you don't fall into the sort of pitfall that every salesperson coming from each sort of background can be relevant because they're selling themselves so well to you. So that is where a good hiring process basically starts. And of course, in combination with defining budgets for the role with a clear OTE and quota setting. I've had it so many times that we are being hired by a client to say, hey, we're looking for this salesperson, this account executive. Can you please find them? And then we ask them, sure, what is the budget for the role? What is the OT? And they say, we have no idea. Then it's more like how can we how can we attract or convince a candidate to go and interview with you where you don't even have your budget defined or your quota defined for this role. So I can't stress how important that is to, before start hiring, have these sort of hygiene factors in place. Make sure that you understand the market as well. I'm going to share also a salary benchmark after this meeting as well. So you have a good benchmark of what the current market does for the salaries of the salespeople in Amsterdam. So that is obviously super important to have that groundwork completed. And it also defines in which league you are playing when I compare it now to football, because if you're able to maybe only pay a salesperson 60k OTE per year, that's going to be a different person than a person earning 200k OTE per year, for example. So it also is important for the type of person and the type of role that you have to have this quota and OTE setting right. And not to mention that you have a realistic OTE and a realistic quota, because that's also, I think, a mistake that I've seen a lot with clients. They define the OTE and they define the quotas just based on Excel sheets and on thin air, as opposed to looking at what reputation does the company have, what market share does the company have, how is the competitive landscape, what is the quality of the sales process, etc. So that's important to have all of that right. After that, it's important as a next step to define the hiring process. So what you want is a uniform hiring process with every candidate that goes through your process. And not sort of an ad hoc who's available or who can maybe do an interview today or tomorrow, sort of strategy, because we've seen that is a big pitfall and that causes mishires basically. So having interview stages predefined, understanding who is going to do the first interview, who is going to do the second interview, the third one, and what's going to be the final interview, but also what is each participant's role going to be during that interview. For example, we have defined in the ideal rep profile what skills, behaviors, we need, right? And then you can say, in the first interview, we're only going to look at behaviors, for example, and we're going to look at the culture fit. So with that, you know exactly what the goal of the first interview is. It's not to talk about a lot about the experience or the skills or the knowledge. It's really to focus on the behavior. Hey, is this person going to be a culture fit? Are the behaviors that this person has and shows the behaviors we are looking at? So that's super clear for the person having the first interview what he or she needs to focus on, if that makes sense. And to further objectify that, a hiring scorecard is a great tool to do that. And a hiring scorecard you can see as a collaboration document where you exactly can rank the candidate based on the skills, behaviors, and knowledge that you need, that you have predefined, obviously. And you also predefine who is going to take what role and which competencies within that hiring scorecard, if that makes sense. Then finally, a good case study or a good role play is, for me, the best predictor of success in the sales role, because it's basically super practical. And if you have somebody who's bluffed themselves through the first 2 interviews, they will they will usually, if you have a good case study or a good practical interview, they will not be able to pass that, because that is where you really test it. And the best case studies that I have seen are always super realistic scenarios of the job itself. For example, if you're interviewing a salesperson that is going to only do the first part of the sales process, obviously you're going to have a case study that really reflects that. So reflecting how somebody asks questions, how somebody is able to qualify, how somebody is able to prospect or to reach out, and make that scenario as real life as possible. For example, hey, you found this prospect. How are you going to approach this prospect with the goal of booking in a meeting? And my preference is always to not give too much context, but to also see how they will really approach it, and what is their way of thinking, basically. And the more senior you go, the more strategic a case study can become. For example, when you're interviewing a VP of sales or a head of sales, then it's maybe also more about what strategic skills does somebody have? How does somebody come up with a sales plan for attacking a new market, or building a whole sales team? So there's also no uniform case study for each role. Obviously, you have to really think about and design a very practical and very extensive case study for each of the different roles that you're interviewing for, if that makes sense. Then training and implementation. This is also a very interesting one. What I've seen a lot is that managers get hired from another company and they are just expected to know how to interview candidates somehow. But maybe that person never had a formal training, doesn't know how to ask good interview questions, and is not equipped to conduct a fair interview process, basically. So I think as TA or HR or as a hiring manager, it's your job to also make sure that people know how to interview, actually. Also, having the right HR systems and feedback loop in place will then make sure that all these things are implemented, that the feedback throughout the hiring scorecard is collected, and the feedback is streamlined, so the communication is always on par, and hiring mistakes are being prevented, basically. That's for the hiring part. I'll give the word to Jorien for the onboarding part.
What I would like to discuss with you is, why is it so important? What are the key challenges in onboarding? What are failures and success factors? And what is very practically a good next step to take? Vladan and I always have interesting discussions. That's why we teamed up for this one as well. And I think when you talk about onboarding importance, I think both the hiring manager, both the recruiter, and both the onboarder all have one thing in common, and that is that this candidate becomes successful and that the potential of this candidate is being exposed during the ramp-up phase as soon as possible. And in that common responsibility and stakeholdership, I think it's crucial also to understand that component of, okay, we've hired someone, we've convinced them to come and work for us, they're eager to get started. How are we now going to bring out this potential as soon as possible? So the importance of onboarding, I think, is clear to accelerate the ramp-up time. And on average, depending on the length of the deal cycle, for sales, ramp-up time can be quantified as 1.5 times the deal cycle. So, for example, if you have a deal cycle of 6 weeks, for example, then the ramp-up time could be 1.5 times that. So this helps you also to consider, okay, when do we want to determine, is this person going to be successful for us? It has a huge impact, the onboarding, on the retention of employees, obviously. And I like how Vladan feels about this, because he truly lives for making a candidate successful within his customers, and not possibly defining, okay, when is the next hire coming up, but really having the ambition to make this candidate successful. And it's linked to onboarding, to making sure that not only is this person going to be successful quickly, but is this continuously moving forward into performance later on as well, post-onboarding. Onboarding is crucial to get eyes and ears on the cultural fit, one of the most important factors in becoming a successful team member. And obviously compliance and alignment with the way of doing, not only in the cultural way, but also in how you approach sales. How do you want to approach and reach out to customers? How do we want our teams to be able to execute this? And onboarding and recruitment are there undeniably linked, I think, in achieving those goals. You see the 3 circles in the visual there. These are the 4 C's that I think are crucial to consider when not only drafting up a onboarding program, but also in executing it. Clarity is number 1, important for creating a good onboarding program. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? What is expected of you? Who can you go to for what? And just full-on clarity in a 360 point of view on what is expected and what the perspective is. And then that impacts the level of control that someone has, the level of confidence that someone has, and the level of consistency that someone experiences and shows during their ramp-up phase. And they're all connected, right? When you have a sense of control and your confidence grows, you're more eager to try new things out. You're more eager to throw yourself in the deep end and to discover new things. The more consistent and the more control you have, the more results will come, and that's a rewarding process as well. So everything that we need to do in enabling someone to be successful quickly can be summarized under these 4 C's. The most common ones, I think, are indeed clear metrics and success factors during the ramp-up phase. I will go through that a little bit with you. It's also about resource allocation, coordination, and communication. Who does what? Who owns what, right? Is it just the hiring manager buddying up and making sure that someone lands well? Or is the team being used as well? How about the general leadership, for example? How about talent or other including factors or stakeholders? So really defining ownership in who does what and who has what tasks and responsibility. Also, scalability is a very common challenge in organizing onboarding, especially if you have a group of different people hiring at the same time. Senior, junior, media differences, but also possibly different roles within the team, meaning SDR or AEs, for example, how to differentiate and where to scale the more common tasks and where to personalize the attention can also be an interesting challenge there. Still, the 4th one is also interesting, the employee retention and engagement, making sure that if there is time and effort and money invested in professional onboarding, do we see that impacting the retention and engagement and performance of these, and learning from that in the best case scenarios, but also in in situations where you had to exit someone as early as possible. What can we learn from that? Both for stakeholders in recruitment, talent, and HR, both for the hiring manager and both for the onboarding responsible person. So these are the main challenges that we spotted. And in those challenges, we have seen some learnings in organizing this. If you could go to the next one for me, Vladan. We have seen people struggling with that challenge and learning from how not to do this. And it starts with really focusing on that ownership. And when there's lack of ownership, there's potential of a disorganized onboarding, not knowing who to go to for what, who is accountable for what, who is responsible for what. But also it sometimes exposes the inconsistency in the current processes already. We're just used to doing it this way because we know where stuff is, and then a new person comes in and all of a sudden it's not as clear for someone that goes in blank, for example. So unclarity in metrics, unclarity in communication is usually a consequence of someone not taking ownership or accountability of these parts. One of the failures that we've seen is insufficient training and resources, and with the best intentions, right? People wanting someone to succeed, but not being equipped with the tools to train and coach someone, or not having the time, right, to do it. There could be many external factors and internal factors that causes this, but it is truly, truly important. Aligning feedback, having clear materials, having a clear structure. So again, the clarity part here is crucial. You see the mini-me syndrome. I get back to that a little bit later, but that's usually in the situation where a successful person in the sales team has been promoted to team lead or a team manager, gets new people in their team, and they tend to expose, okay, this is how I've been successful, just do it this way and you'll be successful too, which is an interesting case to discuss in onboarding because it has good parts of it, but it also has challenging ones and some threats in choosing that approach, again, with the best intentions. But you might pass the authenticity, you might pass the differentiation, you might pass the just different level of someone that's working in a completely different way, and the opportunities that we can see from that as well. Ignoring company and culture fit, it seems so evident that that's almost a given sometimes, that we tend to go on that gut feeling, is someone fitting in, right? But especially in remote onboarding, this can be challenging or tricky. If there's more distance in spotting red flags, or if we're overly spoon feeding new hires and they tend to go in the back seat, right? You tell me what to do. I'm just listening now for 4 weeks, and then I'll see what I can do with that. So really balancing and leveraging, again, that attention, right? What do we enable you with, and what is your role now in showing us what you transfer to the daily practice? So really leveraging attention, enablement, and ownership and accountability from the onboarder. Success factors. Here, I think always the counterpart of obviously the failures. I think to keep this simple, it all starts with clarity. Having a very clear ownership of roles, tasks, responsibilities of stakeholders is crucial. Clear definitions on when onboarding is completed and when are you successful. So those metrics are then really important to define. And an example is that people that are successful in onboarding is they have a very detailed, clear schedule for at least the first 2 weeks. That sounds like spoon feeding, but it is sort of a soft landing base on, we'll take care of you. Please follow this schedule, and ramping up the training content to more practical situations in order to transfer them to the daily practice. But also clarity on expectations, right? What do we expect from you as a new hire in our team? What can you expect from us? Metrics help there, obviously, but also the soft metrics on what kind of attitude do we want to spot with you, right? What kind of assertiveness or proactiveness do we want to see? What do we want to see in your own direction and control in making the most out of this onboarding program? We will enable you. We have a good program ready for you, but it's up to you to make the most out of this. So how can we leverage that as well? But also clarity on locations, where to find what, who to go to for what, how to use what when. Really outlining a playbook, for example, helps there also in scalability. On the metrics, we'll get back to that a little bit later. The confidence, consistency, and control, keeping this simple. Success factors that I've seen in organizations is that they tend to go with a 1.0 skill set during the first month, ramping up to a 2.0 skill set. So really moving on from getting those true basics right first in product knowledge. What's the basic level that we want and what is realistic in what we can expect in those first 4 weeks, right? Preventing that overload of information and just going from step to step. If you can speed up, you will speed up, but just getting those true basics right first. So think 1.0 sales skill set, true definition of what do we want to see in the first sets of activities? What do we want you to be able to do and to show us in the first couple of weeks? And relevant to that activity ramp up later on to that 2.0 skill set. But also aligning feedback, framing solid internal communication, especially if you have more people involved in coaching and onboarding. Framing that scorecards can help to frame feedback, especially for a 1.0 skill set. So really focusing on, this is what I want you to give feedback on in this week. This is what I want the feedback next week to be about. And just ramping up and protecting the onboarder from an overload of information and really on focus points on getting those true basics right first. And ownership and accountability. Like I said, I'm a true advocate and believer of expecting maturity from your onboarders, no matter the age, and really enabling them to self-reflect on their own performance, to score their own sessions, to really give feedback within the team before they receive feedback from the others that have shadowed them or have done role plays with. And a good example is a daily performance review sheet in the first 4 weeks, or a weekly performance review sheet where you have clear metrics on input driven, for example, cadence or sequencing activities, but also that soft metrics side on, okay, what do you feel is your level of assertiveness? What do you feel is your level of control, your level of confidence at the moment? And you can use a simple traffic light system in those performance sheets and color it red if it's not present and not right, color it orange if you're on the right track, and color it green if you feel like, okay, that's on point, I'm on schedule, and then compare. And that brings language to the feedback and alignment there as well. And companies that have been successful with this is they really make the onboarder the owner of that daily or weekly performance scorecard review. This is your performance, right? This is your sheet. You need to make sure that it's filled out. You need to make sure that everyone delivers their input on time. This is your performance. So make sure that you feel it is complete and that it's all clear what is in there, so that the stakeholder, that is the hiring manager or the team lead, can then use this also to check that soft sort of metric side of their performance. And it helps you also with the challenge of maybe making that tough decision after a month, right? In data, in coloring, are we mostly on green or do we see a lot of orange and red, right? That's a good indicator of, okay, should we move forward with this and how, or should we make tougher decisions and based on what, right? So just getting that more complete picture there tends to be quite successful. So executing that, reflecting on that, evaluating and adopting for the next one, I think is crucial to not have an onboarding program that's set in stone. It's always hybrid. It's always learning. It's always evolving depending on the people that we're hiring and what we're learning from internally. Yeah. So questions for you guys. What do you feel based on these success factors before we go into the practical next steps? Lisa, Karina, and Celine, and also Vladan, for you. What do you feel is your #1 success factor in onboarding? What do you feel works really well in onboarding that's interesting for the others to learn from. Vladan, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. What we've adopted quite recently is a Trello board with a lot of clarity and ownership and accountability of who does what, and also giving the person onboarding a lot of ownership there. So they have to, they have to go through the program. They have access to the Trello board. They can use it, and it's their responsibility to make sure that everything is completed at the end. But that's quite a practical thing that I don't know where exactly it sits in the cycle, probably a bit of everything. But for us, that was a really good tool and a good method to have a better onboarding process, basically.
Yeah. So it enhances the ownership and accountability, right? And it enhances the clarity on where to find what and what to focus on, to give some insights in where is this person at this stage.
Exactly.
Practical next steps moving forward, even in reframing it as you go or starting up from scratch. I think it's always good to start with, same as with the ideal rep profile, same as with ICP, right? What is an ideal customer based, a real customer candidate based onboarding that we can have, and defining that with stakeholders, roles, onboarding tasks, I think is crucial. What is the goal of onboarding? When is onboarding successful? Who is involved? Who takes ownership? And then scrolling it down to what kind of materials do we need, and what are the expectations that we have for everyone. Define metrics and performance during ramp up. So establish, first of all, the skill set, same as for hiring people. What do we want them to be able to do in their ramp up phase? What do we want to enable them to be able to execute, to say, I know how to, right? That's the conclusion that we want to draw. So really have input driven metrics, include the soft metrics, for example, assertiveness, attitude, proactiveness, level of confidence, level of control, these things, and really also identify what are red flags and when should we be able to spot these. Is it not completing tasks? Is it not reaching a certain level in the role place? Is it a lack of cultural fit? What are red flags, and when we spot them, how to act on those? I think is also good to define there when you have those metrics defined. Create that clear support framework and leveraging that. Focus on a very detailed training program, first of all, and then creating that soft landing at the end of the ramp up towards the daily practice. Define clearly that 1.0 true basic content and align that with your playbook and content of your training and coaching sessions. And try and pre-schedule to enhance that clarity in the beginning in all calendars, so that everyone knows where to show up for what, how to become prepared for those sessions. And then learning and reflecting on those. So align and frame the feedback overload. The scorecards can help. Daily self-assessments or weekly self-assessments can help. And my tip would be to always start with self-reflection first. So quite some practical next steps. And for that, I can share some materials later on as well. Some background information on differentiation, 5 human learning preferences, and how to maybe accommodate that during your learning and development stage. The pros and cons of the mini-me syndrome, which is just fun and recognizable, I think, to read for quite a few. And a checklist for onboarding preparation is something that I can share afterwards.
Yeah, maybe to add to this, I'll also share the an example of the ideal rep profile that we discussed earlier, a salary benchmark, and some other good materials afterwards.
Good. Then I think we can wrap up.
I think first of all, thank you for being here today, obviously with us. As a common thread, what we see when professionalizing our hiring and our onboarding efforts and trying to minimize the risks of making mistakes in that department. I think looking back, what I see as a common thread is as we professionalize, we need to structure things. We need to have systems in place. We need to look at KPIs and metrics and all of those things that usually talent acquisition and salespeople don't really like. so I think it's very common that this brings along with challenges. And if you have any questions or if we can help afterwards regarding hiring, then of course you can contact me. Always welcome to contact me. If you have any other questions regarding the onboarding part, Jorien is also available. Her contact details are here below as well. We will make sure that the materials will be sent out to you along with the recording of the webinar. And yeah, we want to thank you again, and I hope to see you and hear from you soon.